Some people think power is about controlling others. They think a uniform, a title, or a corner office gives them the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Today, one of those men made a very big mistake, a simple purchase, or so I thought. I didn't particularly enjoy shopping, but today was an exception. I had been invited to speak at an international conference next month, and while I never cared much for appearances, I figured it wouldn't hurt to upgrade my watch. A subtle but refined statement piece. So I walked into Lancaster & Co. at one of the most exclusive luxury boutiques in the city. The store was quiet, the kind of quiet that came with soft piano music and the faint scent of leather and mahogany. Glass cases displayed timepieces that cost more than some people's mortgages. I took my time, scanning the selection. Then I felt it, the weight of someone watching me. The first warning sign. At first, I ignored it. But as I reached for a platinum Rolex, I noticed something in the reflection of the glass case. A security guard, standing by the entrance, arms crossed, watching only me. I exhaled slowly. Here we go. A moment later, a sales associate, a young woman with a forced smile, approached. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but tight. I met her eyes. "Yes," I said, "I'd like to see this one." She hesitated just for a second. Then, instead of reaching for the watch, she glanced towards someone else, and that's when I saw him. The store manager, a broad-shouldered man in an expensive suit, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. And the moment our eyes met, he started walking toward me. The confrontation. I already knew what was coming, but I let him speak first. "Sir," he said, his tone slow, deliberate, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" He didn't blink. "We've received a report that you're making some of our staff uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. A safe word for prejudice. I glanced around. Other customers were browsing freely. No security tailing them, no store managers questioning their presence. Just me. I looked back at him. "Uncomfortable how?" I asked, my voice steady. He gave me a thin smile. "Our clientele is selective. I'm sure you understand." There it was. I clasped my hands behind my back, tilting my head slightly. "Actually, I don't understand," I said. "So why don't you explain it to me?" For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he recovered quickly. "Sir," he said, voice harder now, "I don't have to explain anything. This is a private establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service." I nodded slowly. "That's true," I said, "as long as that refusal isn't based on discrimination." His smile tightened. "Sir, I'm asking you to leave. Let's not make this difficult." I glanced at the sales associate. She looked uncomfortable, but not with me, with him. The mistake. He didn't see coming. I sighed, reaching into my pocket. For a brief moment, the manager tensed, like he expected me to pull out something threatening. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and hit record. His eyes flickered. "You might want to say that again," I said. "For legal purposes." The security guard shifted. The store manager's face darkened. "Sir, if you don't leave now, we'll have to call the police." I smiled. "That's a great idea," I said. His confidence wavered. "What?" "Go ahead," I said, gesturing toward his office. "Call them." He hesitated, because he knew this wasn't going to end the way he thought it would, and soon he was about to find out exactly who he was dealing with. Power is a funny thing. Some people think they have it because of a title or a uniform. Others think it comes from money or status. But real power is knowing exactly how and when to use it. And today, I was about to remind these men who really had it. The calm. Before the storm, the store manager squared his shoulders, clearly expecting me to back down. I didn't. Instead, I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Tell me something," I said, folding my arms. "Have I broken any store policies?" The question caught him off guard. His eyes flicked to the security guard for a brief second before snapping back to me. "That's not the issue here," he said stiffly. I tilted my head. "Really? Because if I haven't broken any policies, then what exactly is the problem?" The security guard shifted uncomfortably. The manager's jaw tightened. I could see cracks forming in their confidence, but instead of admitting their mistake, they doubled down. The empty threat. "Sir, I'm not going to argue," the manager said. "You need to leave. Now." I exhaled, shaking my head. "And if I don't?" The security guard stepped forward. "Then we'll call the police." There it was, the biggest mistake of the day. I slowly reached into my pocket. For the second time, I saw the guard tense, as if expecting something drastic. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. "Go ahead," I said. "Call them." The shift in power. The manager blinked. The security guard hesitated. They had expected me to cower, to apologize, to leave quietly. They hadn't expected me to invite the confrontation. And now, for the first time, they weren't in control anymore. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke again. "Since you're so eager to get the police involved, let's make sure they understand the situation." I turned my phone slightly so the camera caught both of their faces. Here we have the manager of Lancaster & Co. and his security guard asking me, without cause, to leave a store where I have every legal right to shop. Their reasoning? Because I apparently make people uncomfortable. The manager's face reddened. "That's not—" I cut him off. "It gets better," I continued. "They also seem to believe that they can selectively decide who is allowed to shop here, despite no posted policy stating as much. And now they're threatening to call the police to enforce this unofficial policy." The guard swallowed hard. The manager's expression shifted. He wasn't just dealing with an unwanted customer anymore. He was dealing with a public relations nightmare, the breaking point. The store was quiet now. Other customers had noticed. A few whispered to each other. One woman took out her own phone, likely recording. I turned back to the manager. "So," I said, arching an eyebrow, "are you going to call the police or not?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then finally, his pride overrode his common sense. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Fine," he said, voice clipped. "Let's settle this properly." He dialed. I smirked. He had no idea what he had just done. Power is not about who speaks the loudest. It's about who controls the conversation. And right now, the store manager thought he had the upper hand. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The arrival of the police, 2 uniformed officers entered the store, weaving through glass display cases and well-dressed shoppers. One was tall and stocky, built like a linebacker. The other was shorter but sharp-eyed, scanning the situation with the practiced gaze of someone used to dealing with disputes. The manager straightened, puffing out his chest like a man who knew he had already won. "Officers, I'm so glad you're here," he said smoothly. "We have a situation." I clasped my hands behind my back, watching. Let him dig his own grave. "This man," the manager continued, jerking a thumb toward me, "has been causing a disturbance in my store. He refuses to leave when asked and is making my staff uncomfortable." The tall officer turned to me. "Sir, is that true?" I met his gaze, completely calm. "No," a flicker of hesitation. He hadn't expected that. "Mind explaining your side?" I nodded. "Of course, but before I do, I'd like you to take a look at this." I reached into my jacket pocket. For the third time that day, the manager tensed, as if expecting something dangerous. What I pulled out, however, was far more dangerous to him than any weapon. A small black leather wallet. I flipped it open and handed it to the officer, a moment of silence. Then the officer's expression changed. The store manager frowned. "What? What's that?" The shorter officer took the wallet, reading it carefully. Then he cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, his tone was completely different. "The truth comes out, sir," the officer said, turning to me. I wasn't aware you were on the city's Business Ethics Oversight Committee." The room went silent. The manager blinked. "The what?" The officer exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mr. Miles isn't just a customer. He's a member of the regulatory board that oversees ethical business practices in this district." Another silence. Then the manager's face turned the color of old paper. I tilted my head slightly, watching as realization sank in. "The fear sets in you. You're on the oversight board?" the manager stammered. I clasped my hands in front of me, giving him a polite smile. "That's right. Part of my job is ensuring businesses uphold fair and ethical practices." I glanced around the store, and it seems like we have a case study right here. The security guard looked away, suddenly very interested in the floor. The manager swallowed hard. I could see it now, the panic creeping in, because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a reportable offense, and I was the one who had the power to report it, the collapse he tried to recover. "Mr. Miles, I think we've had a misunderstanding here. Perhaps we can—" I held up a hand. "Oh, no need for that," I said smoothly. "We'll clear everything up in my formal report." The manager actually flinched. His pride told him to keep fighting. His self-preservation told him to shut up. Self-preservation won. I turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your time, but I believe this is no longer a police matter. This is a business violation, and I'll be handling it accordingly." The officers exchanged glances, then nodded. "Understood, sir." And just like that, the balance of power shifted. Some people learn lessons the easy way. Others, they learn the hard way. And today, the manager of Lancaster & Co. was about to get an education in consequences. The final word. The store was silent now. Customers whispered among themselves. The sales associate who had hesitated earlier now looked anywhere but at me. And the security guard. He had stepped back as if hoping to quietly erase himself from this disaster. But the manager, he stood there, face pale, eyes darting between me and the officers, desperate to regain control. "Mr. Miles, please," he said, his voice suddenly lacking the arrogance it had earlier. "This was just a misunderstanding." I turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, I trust you'll document this incident properly?" The taller officer nodded. "Absolutely, sir." I gave a small smile. "Good. Because this is a textbook example of commercial discrimination." I turned back to the manager. "And as for your store, I'll personally ensure that Lancaster & Comas is added to our high-priority audit list." His breath hitched. "Audit?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said smoothly. "Frequent and unannounced compliance checks. You know, to ensure there are no misunderstandings like this in the future." The realization hit him all at once. This wasn't just about today. This was about his store's future, a permanent mark on its record, a constant risk of being inspected, a potential fine so large it could shut the whole place down. Panic flooded his face. "Mr. Miles," he started, but it was too late. The store falls silent. As I turned to leave, I felt every eye in the store on me. The same people who had been ignoring me earlier were now watching with wide-eyed shock. The sales associate shifted awkwardly. The security guard suddenly found great interest in his shoes. Even the other customers, the ones who had silently gone about their shopping, now whispered in hushed voices, because they had just witnessed a shift in power. The man they had written off as unimportant had just dismantled the entire illusion of authority in this store. The final blow. I reached the door, then paused. I turned back, looking directly at the manager one last time. He stood frozen, still processing the ruin I had just dropped onto his career. I let a small, knowing smile cross my lips. Then, in the same polite, calm tone he had used on me earlier, I said, "Perhaps this store really isn't for everyone, but not in the way you thought." His face turned ghost white, and with that, I walked out. leaving behind a room full of people who had just learned a very valuable lesson.